Elections integrity. Is Putin having a change of heart after 4 years of...
Listen up!
We get a report from Moscow. And what about made in the USA voter suppression? Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey joins me. Then,
it's a mind-numbing figure.
an agonizing milestone, 1 million COVID deaths around the world. Can European democracies lead their people through a second wave? Plus,
that the president has not been a great example of civility.
Digging deeper into making American democracy more resilient with our Michelle Martin. Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Christiane Amanpour in London. For 4 years now, Americans and Europeans have been trying to combat Russia's successful interference in the West democratic elections. According to the FBI, Russia at this very moment is working to influence the 2020 US election, just as it did in 2016. But could President Putin be having a change of heart after 4 years of President Trump? Here's CNN's Matthew Chance from Moscow with an exclusive interview with the man known as the Kremlin's chief propagandist.
There's been a distinct change in tone on Russian television about President Trump.
It was a very nice offer from President Putin, and I could have said no thank you, or I could have said thank you.
This spoof video on its English language channel promoting US election coverage shows Trump as the loser, taking up a job as a top Russian news anchor.
And I said, I'll take it.
It's a humorous jab at Trump's apparent affection for Russia. But the country's actual top state news anchor isn't laughing. In his first ever US TV interview, the man dubbed the Kremlin's chief propagandist tells me how hopes of blossoming US-Russian relations under President Trump have vanished.
Russia has never had as many sanctions as it has under Trump. Not a single state visit to Russia or to the United States.
Is it your hope that if President Trump wins a second term, that things will change, that he might be able to have a more positive relationship with Moscow?
Nothing will change. That's America.
But actually, things might change.
There'll be a price to pay. And Putin knows the reason he doesn't want me as president. He knows me, and he knows I mean it.
And Kisilov, sanctioned by the EU for spreading Kremlin propaganda, tells me a hardline Biden presidency could plunge US-Russian relations into a dangerous spiral.
What will he do? Go to war against us? No way to win for him.
Well, he said that he would.
Let me repeat. Russia is the only country in the world with the capability to turn America into the radioactive ash.
With its
America into the radioactive ash. Turn the only country in the world with the capability to turn America into the radioactive ash. Third country in the world with the capability to turn America into the radioactive ash.
This is the first time this guy's ever been interviewed. If we as Americans don't take something like that serious, knowing that Russia is basically just within, 2,000 miles of Washington State. They claim that you can see the Russian lights from Alaska. If we don't take a statement like that serious, the same as whenever Brezhnev said that we will take the American people over and never fire a shot, it will be nobody's fault but our own if we do not take these types of accusations as well as threats serious coming from the old USSR.
With its
Russia is the only country in the world with the capability to turn America into the radioactive ash.
With its vast nuclear arsenal, that may be terrifyingly true. But on Russia's flagship current affairs show, it's how America's already destroying itself that's dominating coverage. The chaos and death shows the US has lost its moral leadership, Kisilov says. For the Kremlin, accused by US intelligence of sowing discord, that may be a victory of sorts, no matter who the next president may be.
If you were forced to choose between a Trump presidency or a Biden presidency, which one would you go for? In English, tell me, which one would you go for?
I would like to throw a coin, so nothing changes. Nothing will change.
Matthew Chance there. So, bluff or bluster from the Kremlin, who knows? But what we do know is that there is no shortage of election interference by the US itself. There are renewed fears about America's long history of voter suppression and new concerns about voter intimidation. And of course, there's President Trump himself refusing to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Could that even be possible? A disputed election would likely be decided by the courts, but there are a whole host of supporting actors, from Congress to the states themselves. And my first guest tonight, the Massachusetts State Attorney General Maura Healey, has vowed to battle any and all election interference for the good of all Americans, she says, and she's joining me now from Boston. Attorney General, welcome to the program. I posed a whole load of questions there because us sitting here, we can't even imagine that in so-called the world's most developed democracy, there may not be an accepted transition. There may be a disputed election. What keeps you up at night right now from your perspective?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you. Look, we are in unprecedented times, and let's just review what the president has recently done to undermine free and safe and secure elections in this country. I can't believe I'm even saying that, but let's just review the last few weeks. He sabotaged the U.S. Postal Service to slow down mail-in ballots. He sent robocalls that threatened black voters with turning personal information over to debt collectors and the like. He's threatened to send law enforcement and the military to the polls. And the Republican National Committee and the Trump campaign have been filing dozens of lawsuits all over the country to try to stop early voting, to stop mail-in voting, and do all sorts of things that are about keeping people from voting. I'll tell you, my job as Attorney General, and I'm joined by Democratic AGs around this country to do two things. One, to protect people's exercise of their vote. They have the right to vote. We just need to make sure that they're not kept from voting. And number two, to make sure that every vote is counted in this election.
So let me ask you then, you listed three major issues there. One of them was about the post office. You yourself, as Massachusetts Attorney General, have brought a lawsuit. I mean, you sued to try to resolve an issue. Can you explain what that was, and have you been successful?
Well, several weeks ago now, it came to light that the Postmaster General, who was a friend of Trump's, had been put in charge recently and had made all sorts of changes that were illegal, that were without permission or authority from the Regulatory Commission that oversees the Postal Service. And in doing so, it appeared to be an effort to directly interfere with letter carriers and the Postal Service's ability to deliver the mail. Obviously so important in this country because so many Americans are going to be voting by mail in this election. Many of our states are now doing mail-in voting exclusively or as an option for the first time. And so based on that, a number of states joined. We actually filed 3 different lawsuits, took him to court, and won 3 separate nationwide injunctions stopping Trump and Postmaster General DeJoy from further undermining the Postal Service and restoring order to that agency. So it's an example, Christiana, of the kind of work that we need to do as AGs and how we've been there on the front lines as we have the last few years to do everything we can to make sure we have a free and secure election.
Stacey Abrams, as you know, the unsuccessful candidate for governor of Georgia, nonetheless has made voting rights and fighting suppression her key mission right now. And she told me that the only way to, combat it is voter turnout. So I want to know whether you think voters will be motivated to turn out. I just read some statistics which are amazing regarding voters of color. Nationally, black voters wait on average 45% longer to vote than white voters and are more likely to wait more than 30 minutes to cast a ballot. What do you think that means? And do you think that these suppression tactics, the intimidation tactics that you mentioned, threatening to bring potentially, armed or some kind of militia to monitor polls, are you afraid that will have an effect?
Well, I think Stacey Abrams is exactly right. This is about making sure that people are able to go out and vote. We want people energized to vote. There is so much on the line, not just for the future of our country, but really the direction of our world with this election. We know the importance of that, and we know how harmful it has been to global democracy to have Donald Trump in power. I mean, whether it's the COVID crisis or anything else, we live with that reality every day. I'll tell you a few things. Voter intimidation is real. If you thought you could win an election outright, fairly, you wouldn't have to play games and you wouldn't have to try to steal it, which is what Donald Trump is doing with these repeated efforts to try to scare voters from the polls, intimidate them by saying that he's going to allow private parties and to work with law enforcement at the polls. I mean, just recently, I'll tell you, we had a situation, early voting in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There are a number of private citizens that turned up armed, of course, at polling locations in an effort to intimidate voters. And the Virginia Attorney General was clear. It is a crime in this country to intimidate voters. It is a crime to interfere in an election. And so a number of us immediately put out guidance as top law enforcement officers in our states, saying we're not going to tolerate that. And so that is real, unfortunately. I mean, it's why you see those robocalls that I mentioned. Imagine robocalls going into the states of Pennsylvania and Michigan right now that are attempting to scare black voters from voting by targeting information that says if you request a mail-in ballot with personal information provided to us, we can turn that over to a debt collector or somebody who is looking for those with open warrants. All of it nonsense, all of it outrageous. But again, if you can't win it fairly, you need to try to steal it, and that's what the RNC is doing.
Attorney General, Channel 4 is a very highly respected news organization here in the UK, and last night it had an exclusive report saying that it had been shared many reams of data, one of the biggest leaks in history regarding what apparently was the Trump campaign's tactics in 2016. And this was a way to try to micro-target voters, either to come out for them or not to come out for Hillary Clinton. There was one piece in it that's called Deterrence. And I just want to play for you what the anchor of the program, the discussion he had with one of the state senators in Wisconsin about this phenomenon.
What's really interesting is that a huge number of these names were marked down for deterrence.
So they specifically looked at those individuals and said, we are going to do everything to try to deter them and create ads that would do that. That is a strategic level that by no means did I know was existing. That is mind-boggling. I'm like shocked that they had in 2016, all the way down to, we need to deter that one. Somebody has worked this hard to strategically disenfranchise you, to discourage you. What it should tell people is the power, right, of their vote.
So President Trump has called this fake news. He says that about a lot of things, including the New York Times tax records and many stories that he doesn't like. But one of the campaign officials from 2016 later publicly, he was a chief data scientist, said that they actually did hope that people don't show up to vote. Are you concerned that that 2016 tactic might happen again in 2020, and that it might be successful in 2020?
Well, let me say this. The American people are going to decide this election, not Donald Trump. Now, that's not to say that a lot of work doesn't need to be done to ensure a free and safe and fair election. It does, and that's why we're battling in court right now. But it is certainly the case that the same slimy tactics that were used in 2016 are going to be used again. I can go even further. A lot of that came out of the work and investigations done of Cambridge Analytica. I'm a state attorney general who joined with others, and we have ongoing investigations right now into Cambridge Analytica. It is absolutely the case that those tactics are going to be deployed again. We've already seen evidence of it. So it is really important that we, against the context too, remember the last 4 years where in many states there were things that made it harder for people to vote. The institution of voter ID laws, efforts to make it harder for people to vote, the closing of polling places, for example. And so it's against that context that we need to work even harder to make sure that people have the ability to go exercise their vote, whether it's early voting in person or by mail or on election day. And we're going to be in court making sure that we're doing everything we can to make that happen because, yes, we are up against a lot.
Okay, so I want
to stop right there in what she's talking about to verify in what she's talking about is true. And I'm just not going to go back to 2016, but I'm going to go all the way back whenever Mr. Gore, a Tennessee representative, was running for president, and the Republicans made up fictitious lies that if the Democrats got in power, that they would go house to house and seize everybody's guns from them. You may not have thought in the beginning, or at least I didn't, that this was going to have severe ramifications upon the election, but believe it or not, the people in the state of Tennessee took that not figuratively, but literally, to the point that the people in the state of Tennessee did not hold up their own man running for president, which is basically almost unheard of. It's almost unheard of. But because of the propaganda, the lies, guess what it done? It influenced the election. Now, if Al Gore would have won the state of Tennessee, he would have won the election. If Al Gore would have won the state of Florida, he would have won the election. But we know by the hanging chads that went on during the Al Gore presidential election that Al Gore did not win because the election was thrown in regards towards a lot of ballot boxes never did make it to the precincts of being able to be counted to begin with. As a matter of fact, they wound up down there in the creeks where the alligators roam, down there in Florida. But once more, who do we have to blame whenever your own state won't hold your own man up? We have to blame ourselves because we had been bought into a lie that if the Democrats got in power, according to the Republicans, that they was going to house, taking everybody's guns. So what she's talking about here is, in fact, real. And with the computer system being as strong as what it is today, and all the other lies and propaganda that's out there floating around, even intensifies it even more so today than what it was during the Al Gore presidential election, which was give or take about 30 years ago. Now, what bothers me, as much as just about anything, is to hear somebody from Russia make a statement that they'll make America, or they have the capability of making America an ash box. Which basically now you're threatening my life because I'm an American and you're from Russia. Why would you have even remotely said anything like that if it wasn't already going through various people's minds over in Russia? Russia, no doubt, is close to America, but America's close to Russia whenever it comes to doing something like that. And that's the very thing that I have tried to prevent, or one of the things that I've tried to prevent, as well as getting my message out to the general public of John 3:16 and of end-time biblical Bible messages, is trying to prevent a nuclear holocaust of ever occurring. I'm going to go as far as to say this. If something like that was to ever occur, I pray to God that the first people that they come after are the people right here in Tennessee, in West Tennessee. I hope they come after them, and I hope they hold them accountable, because they did not support the man that they was supposed to have supported. And I ain't just talking about Al Gore, but I'm talking about the founder of the Windmill Ministries. I pray to God that if anything like that ever erupts, that the first people that they take to the chopping block or the execution chambers will be the people that could have prevented a nuclear holocaust from happening, but sat idly by and allowed for it to happen. That's how much I got respect for the people that has brought this injustice up into this country and up into this planet. They don't think that they're going to be held accountable one day in God's eyes towards what that they have done. I got news for them. They're going to be held accountable. I'm a friend of God, and God's a friend of mine. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect, because I know that I'm not. But these people have had ample opportunity, especially since I've come back here this last time, since 2014. They have had ample opportunity of turning this around. And I still see zero progress. Zero progress as far as them trying to clean up what that they have done here towards trying to abolish one of God's messengers. So if, hypothetically speaking, something like that was to ever occur, to the point that we would see mushroom clouds devastating millions of people's lives here in America, or vice versa, us having to use the same type of resistance over in Russia. If that ever occurred, I pray to God right now, God, please come after the people that could have stopped it. Come after the people that could have rectified it, or could have even promoted a different ideal or a different image about end-time biblical Bible prophecy. Because my message has not been a message primarily to stop the nuclear war. My message has been a message to save souls and to prepare people's lives for the inevitable of things to come pertaining to the New World Order, pertaining to the opening of the second seal and the third seal and the fourth seal out of the seven trumpets, and to prepare people and to tell people that the God that we serve is not a God of the dead, but that he is a God of the living, and that there's no other way to enter into the kingdom of God other than through the blood of Jesus Christ. That has been my message. And I'll continue to preach this message until I myself die. Regardless whether I die by nuclear contamination or natural occurrences that may happen in my life, I will continue to stand under the foot of the cross, preaching the same message that I began in 1989 preaching right up here in a radio station called WENK. My message has not changed one iota. Has the technique of my message changed? Not really. Not really. I still feel like a lone wolf. I still feel like a lone wolfer. Even though I know that I'm not a wolf, I'm still using those type of methods or those type of tactics in getting my message out to the general public. I'm using a different method today with my telephone pertaining to my social media platform, to where it's not quite as hard as far as going to church, to person, to community, to state. I'm using a different method today in comparison to what I started out with 30, 25, 20 years ago, 15, 10 years ago. I'm using a different method that's a little bit more simpler of getting my message out to the general public. But as far as the message itself, it has not changed. And it's not going to change. All these people around here that thought that old Juby had lost it, or thought that old Juby would give up on this quest, to this day, they still have yet to make any type of amends in regards towards how that they have let not just the ministry down, not just the founder of the ministry, but how that they have let God down. And I guess if that's what it takes is a nuclear bomb blowing up over here in America before they're going to realize that they have screwed up. I guess if that's what it's going to take, then so be it, that's what it's going to take. But the fact of the matter is, what I'm saying is, I have done my part. I am ready to depart from this world. I am ready to lay down my life as a sacrifice, as a martyr type figure, because I know that I've reached this standoff with not just the world in general, but with the so-called Christian society around here that never did believe in me to begin with. So I have reached this point of praying to God that the sooner the better, whenever I've lived up my last 9 lives to the point of my death becoming influential and me going home to living with Jesus. Now that doesn't mean that I want to enhance it. It doesn't mean I want to speed it up. It doesn't mean that I want to self-induce it. But what it does mean is that I'm ready. I'm prepared to go. I have made my final plea to not only God, but to society. I have knocked again and again and again on those doors that obviously refuses to open. And because of it, I have become weary. I have become faint. I have become I'm looking for the word, discouraged in what God set me to sail and doing 30 plus years ago because of no help, no supporters. So why should I think anything any different that these people do actually want war? They do want rapes and murders. They do want society to turn into anarchy. They do want the fires, the floods, the hurricanes, things to be out of proportion. Why should I think anything any different? Because I'm not getting any type of different response today than what I did whenever I first stood out in the eyes of the general public 30 plus years ago from people like Tommy Moore, the judge, Tommy Thomas, the attorneys, the courts in general, the judicial system in general, I haven't gotten any type of different response. So why should I think any different? That they still believe and think about me the same way that they've always thought about me. You know, I just got off the phone a while ago with an individual that I discussed to him. I said, yeah, these people talk about good. They talk about bad. They talk about the devil. They talk about the Lord. But they create their own devil. And they create their own Lord. They create their own justification, even though they know that it's not just. Which just shows you how touched in the head that they are. How corrupt that they are. That they would be willing to sit back and allow for innocent people to become scarred and marred and just as perverted, and those to become just as contaminated as they are. It shows you what type of people that they are. So be it as it may, regardless whether it be a nuclear bomb, in which I hope the American people never have to go through, or a meteor, or a solar flare, or a terrible, terrible, horrible earthquake, or whatever it's going to take to break this resistance movement pertaining to this standoff here in America, in people not supporting a ministry that they know wants utopia and peace. Regardless what it may take, I have given it all over to the Heavenly Father and said, God, whatever it's going to take, in whatever way that you want to display it, in whatever format, it's up to you. Because the fault falls upon the feet of those that could have done something that chose not to, beginning with people like Tommy Moore and Tommy Thomas. Your educated society. Those are going to be the people that's going to be held accountable. The preachers, the teachers, the counselors, the people in the area that could have paid more attention to the things that the founder of the Windmill Ministries was promoting and putting out there to the general public, but because of their laziness or their doubt, their unbelief, their non-faith, they chose to let it slide. And now we're where we're at today. But getting back to what she has said, her words are very, very accurate and very, very true to the point that propaganda can and will change the whole dynamics of a election. Regardless whether it be an American election, a so-called Russian election, a Mexican election, a so-called Honduras or Colombia or South America election, or any other type of election, propaganda. If you convince enough people with enough lie, either multiple lies or the same lie, you can definitely literally throw an election because of the propaganda. Like I said, whenever I seen this for myself, pertaining to Al Gore, I knew then that the Americans was in trouble. Just like whenever I seen how that they dealt with Jimmy Swaggart being caught with a prostitute on the same exact sexual immoral behavior as Bill Clinton. But I seen Bill Clinton get idolized because of what Bill Clinton done. Bill Clinton basically got put on a higher pedestal in the eyes of the wicked and the demonic towards glorifying what that he had done, versus taking a man that was preaching the gospel and we're going to crucify him on the cross. Whenever I seen these things with my own eyes here in America, I knew then, yep, America's in trouble. whenever they're not being fair as much towards one as they are the other, even though one's a preacher and one's a politician, I knew then that America was in trouble in the way that it viewed things, in the way that it responded to things, in the way that it was willing to inject its self-will upon the things.
This because a lot of people are very confused. For instance, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has said, and he said it in response to President Trump refusing to, confirm to a reporter, to an interviewer, that actually, he would accept the election result and there'd be a peaceful transition. So Mitch McConnell specifically said, after the results of the November 3rd election, there will be a peaceful transition January 20th, as always. Now, some are concerned about his specific reference to November 3rd. Are you concerned that there is any way the Republicans or, President Trump's people might use November 3rd as the only date that counts in terms of ballot counting, etc.? What can people expect on Election Day and the days and weeks afterwards?
Well, I think you've seen a basic vision that's like this, okay? For weeks now, Trump has been trying to sow confusion and undermine people's belief in mail-in voting, right? And so I think what we may see come election night, as votes are still being counted and the mail-in ballots in many states can't be opened until that day, it may take some time. We may know a winner that night, or it may take days, several days before all votes are in. During that time, the concern is that Trump will call the election in his favor, even though votes haven't been counted.
See, once more, whenever you're dealing with a individual that knows the power of confusion, knows the power of anarchy, knows the power of manipulation, knows how that people can be misled. When you're dealing with an oligarch like Trump that is using these tactics for his own benefit, you're dealing with something that can become very, very lethal and harmful to their own people in the United States. And it's one thing if you want to tell, let's just use this for an illustration. If you want to tell a little white lie, something that really don't matter. But to the Tennesseans, during the Al Gore presidential election, by telling them that if the Democrats got in power, they was going to go house to house, confiscating people's guns from them. That wasn't a little deal. That wasn't a little white lie. People took that literally, not figuratively. And come hell or high water, the Democrats that used to be Democrats, you couldn't have made them to have voted that night for Al Gore, thinking that all their guns was going to be taken from them within days or weeks shortly after the Democrat Party come in power. Whenever you have this type of authority that you can manipulate the masses, you're running into danger. But what makes it even worse is that whenever you're dealing with somebody like Trump, which has showed himself to be a sleazeball in using these type of tactics against his own people, it wouldn't be any different if it would have been Putin himself whispering in the ear of Donald Trump, telling Donald Trump what to do and how to do it, because you got a bunch of people in America that are naive and they'll basically believe whatever that you tell them, especially if you tell it more than once and if you continue to harp on it again and again and again. Whenever you have somebody like this that are playing with people's emotions and playing on doing things for his own benefit rather than the country's benefit, you no longer should be looking at Donald Trump as him being a friend, but rather to be looking at him towards him being the foe. In other words, if he's willing to bring this type of injustice, if he's willing to bring this type of confusion, if he's willing to bring this type of hardship upon to his own people, should Donald Trump be looked upon as a friend? Somebody that is doing the will of the people? I'll let you decide come election night. I'm not participating in neither one because I've got my beef on both sides pertaining to how that this group done this and how that group done that. At my age, I can see how that they're both in the wrong. And because of it, I refuse to work with an organization that I think is broken and I think it's unrepairable. I refuse to associate myself with a group of people that can take a saint and turn him into a devil and take a devil and turn him into a saint. I refuse to work with this type of influence and this type of corruption with this type of system. I refuse. In other words, I don't want their blood on my hands once they pull off what they're going to pull off, the same towards what they done during Al Gore's presidential election. And as far as I'm concerned, the people not only got manipulated then, but they've got manipulated in other administrations that has led us down this path of where we are right now. I don't see of no way of fixing the system unless you do like the little farmer that planted his crop and only about half of it come up, to the point of disking it all back under and replanting the crop. That's where I am in looking at the American system. The only way for us to go forward in a fair, righteous, godly way is that we're going to have to break this system down to the point that it is no longer considered a system. And we're going to have to reinvent and re-engineer a brand new system based upon 21st century documentation pertaining to data platform worthiness, and go with a brand new system that will engineer more fairness and justice in everybody's life rather than just a few. Why people haven't already awoken to this and are willing to do something about this is still beyond me. I can see where they've basically been bewitched, hoodwinked, brainwashed, deceived in the way that they are doing, in thinking, oh, if I go to the ballot box, oh, if I vote this one in, it's all going to change. Well, that's what I heard the last time. And that's what I heard the time before that. And that's what I heard the time before that time. You know, we stair step every 4 years, and I keep hearing the same thing and keep seeing the same results. Well, what's, according to doctors and science, what's that a sign of? It's a sign of insanity. If you think that you're going to continue to keep doing the same thing and you're going to get different results out of doing the same thing, that is a sign of insanity. So I refuse to go to the ballot box. I refuse to participate in a system that I know is not going to be corrected or reformed in this way. And I'll let it play itself out. That way, whenever the battle axe falls, blood will not be upon my hands, but it will be upon those that thought that they could continue to manipulate the system. I'm not challenging the system. In a sense, the system is trying to challenge me simply because it wants to punish me because I don't want to be foolish enough to get my paperwork in order to go vote. Why do I want to vote on something that I know isn't working? Why do I want to vote on something that hasn't worked fairly and repetitiously for the masses? I don't, and I won't. That'd be like me buying an automobile that I don't want to buy. You know, I've driven it. I've heard it run. I've sat in it. I've looked at it. Prayed about it. And I still don't want to buy that vehicle. But yet now, you're still jumping up and down as a salesman, trying to bring a high pressure sale in. You got to buy it. You got to buy it. You got to buy it. You can't miss out on this deal. You can't miss out on this deal. There won't be another one like it. You got to buy it. No, I don't. I don't have to buy it. And neither nor does the rest of society. They don't have to give in to this BS that has been going on now for the past 30 plus years, that is now more obvious of it going on, more so than what it was on the first 30 years. In other words, I've seen it intensify, and I've seen it become more corrupt, kind of like the hanging chads pertaining to the state of Tennessee, not willing to hold up their own man. I've seen it change. It's mutated, okay? But the pattern that is holding is that things has continued to gotten worse. Not better, but worse. We're seeing more children being killed. We're seeing more people being destroyed because of drugs and overdoses. We're seeing more people commit suicide in our military. We're seeing our bridges fall apart. We're seeing our roads fall apart. We're seeing our indebtedness towards $25 trillion still escalating. We're seeing more prisoners being injected into our jail system than we've ever had. We're seeing it go the opposite direction of peace. It's counterproductive. A peace, when your divorce rate now 5 out of 10 that winds up getting married in a 2-year span winds up getting a divorce. All the abortions, all the shootings and killings. I mean, Chicago, on a good weekend, 30 deaths is considered a good weekend. If the moon's out, it's 75 or 80. It's become old hat. And these things was going on way before the coal vote ever hit, pertaining to Chicago being out of balance and some of these other cities. Now, since the coal votes hit, now it's began to awaken people towards taking that smoke screen away, and now we see the real deal of what people's been having to go through on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. Now, if you want to continue to be blinded, bewitched, bamboozled, we'll continue to stay on the track that you're on. Continue to participate and associate with a system that you know has failed. Because it's obviously the people that is struggling towards keeping it alive are the very people that corrupted it to begin with, such as your attorneys, your judges, your politicians, as well as your preachers. Yes, let's not forget about them, who have covered us up from day one that allowed for this to get out of hand the way that it is.
We're just going to have to see what happens. I hope that isn't the case. I would hope that every American, regardless of party, because this shouldn't be about partisanship, if there's something fundamental bedrock to this country and the way it's operated through times of great strife and division and world wars and the like, it's that we're able to hold free and secure elections. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has done a lot to undermine that, and the RNC is enabled and worked right alongside him. But I
here's the
believe
thing.
and have more faith in the American people.
The American people or the American institutions. I mean, as you say, this has been a norm-busting presidency, and things are challenged that one could never have imagined. I mean, basic checks and balances, basic institutional precedents and things that are written in law. What is the law, and what is the procedure if a president, if there's a disputed election? We saw what happened in 2000. It went to the Supreme Court. What do you think could happen? What is the responsibility of the states, of Congress, the courts, to ensure that an election is held and all the ballots are counted and then the result is, enforced?
Yeah. Well, look, by Constitution and by law, there has to be a new president as of January 20th. I believe personally that there will be a peaceful transfer of power once the votes are counted. And we're in a situation now where we may have an entirely new Supreme Court. It's hard to entirely predict what might happen there. No doubt there's a chance that cases can work their way up to the Supreme Court, including cases that we're involved in now. But, I am in the camp of believing that we will have a peaceful transfer of power. I do think that there may be a fight about the vote count. And that's why it's very important to me to tell voters in this country, and I don't care who you're voting for, we want your vote to count. So vote early, in person where you can. Make sure you have a plan to vote. And us in law enforcement and state AGs are going to be there in the courts making sure that your vote is counted.
It's extraordinary. Thank you so much, Attorney General.
I don't think the controversy is so much about the vote being counted as it is people being counted more than once. And people that's been dead for years are still winding up at the ticket ballot boxes. I think that's part of the problem. In other words, the system hasn't been overhauled. We're still dealing with 19th century problems like they did at the hanging of the Chads down in Florida in the 21st century. That's the problem. That's the whole problem there. It's not that people's vote won't be counted. I guarantee you, people's vote will be counted. Or I say I guarantee you, the things that we seen in Florida whenever they was taking Democrat counties and trying to avoid and making sure that the people didn't vote or get their votes on time, by making it that much harder for people to get down there and turn their votes in. And whenever you hear the stories where the ballot boxes got tipped over into various creeks and streams, there's always that possibility that stuff like that could happen again. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not. But I think the biggest thing is that whenever you have dead people that are still coming up on the ballot boxes, or you have people that somehow or another can put in 2 or 3 votes. There has to be some way or another of modifying the system to where we know that the people that's not supposed to be voting aren't voting, and the people that have voted will have the opportunity to vote, and that their vote will, in fact, be counted. That's the controversy. That's the problem that we're having right here in America in using these 20th century tactics in the 21st century. So until they can straighten out all these other problems, as well as me, myself, and I knowing how the things is done on a buddy-buddy system pertaining to the courthouses, of how that they're going to take this one and bury him for the same charge that they barely give this one a fine for, whenever we start seeing fairness across the board, what's fair for the goose is fair for the gander, whenever we start seeing the system start treating everybody as more of a fair system, then maybe people like myself will be more apt of filling out the paperwork and going standing in a line and casting their vote. But for right now, the way that I see it, it is pathetic in thinking, or me trying to convince myself in thinking, that why would I believe that this election is going to be any different than the last election, or the election before that election, or the election before the other elections, or I could go on for the past 30 years. Why would I want to convince myself of a lie, knowing what the end result is going to be? That's where you start touching off on insanity, according to the doctors and the scientists, that if you continue to do the same thing and you expect different results, you are considered somebody that's not within a reasonable mind. It's not logical. It's not practical. You have stepped off into the abyss to the point that, yeah, because you're messed up in the head, now you want me to be just as messed up as you are? I don't think so. Just because you're willing to walk off into the mouth of the volcano don't necessarily mean that I am, or at least not that one. I may be willing to walk off into the mouth of the volcano pertaining to courageousness and patrioticness and my Christian values of what I believe in and what God has bestowed up into my life, but it's not going to be that volcano. I'm not walking off into your volcano. I'll walk off into my own volcano, providing that it is a volcano. I don't think it's a volcano, because according to the teachings of Christ, it says to weep whenever they come into the world and to rejoice whenever they leave. It'd be a blessing for me to leave. A blessing. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us.
For joining us from Boston tonight. Now, here in the UK, the biggest daily rise in coronavirus cases since the pandemic began, more than 7,000. And it comes...
I'm going to leave it right there. I ain't going to get into this corona stuff because this is fouling with the other messages that I've already put out, which is basically about 2 or 3 pertaining to the corruptfulness of the system and Russia and etc. So I don't want to keep pouring more messages into the same message, because obviously the American people can't handle but 1 or 2 messages at a time. Their comprehensionable skills isn't but about 30 plus minutes, to the point that they can't sit and listen to a 2-hour course. They can barely sit and listen to a 30-minute course and feed all that in, much less try to feed 2-hour course into there. I mean, I'm still dealing with babies. I'm still having to spoon feed people, and even then they still don't get it. And they probably won't never get it. And it ain't got nothing to do with education. It's got to do with common sense. Good luck to all of us.